They laughed when I spent my life savings on Grandpa's old bee farm, but a year later, they were begging to be part of what I built.
Hello, my name's Claire. When Grandpa passed, the family gathered like vultures around a table full of papers and promises. Everyone wanted the house, the land, the antiques, the valuable things. Me, I just wanted the one place he and I used to sit together every summer afternoon, his old bee farm. It wasn't much. A few aging hives, a rusted shed, and rows of wildflowers gone untamed. My father called it a lost cause, and my sister joked that I'd just inherited a bunch of bugs. Even Mom looked at me with pity when I said I planned to keep it. Claire, honey, she sighed, that place hasn't made $1 in years. They didn't understand. To me, that land wasn't about profit, it was about peace. When I was little, Grandpa used to call the bees his tiny soldiers of patience. He'd say, "You can't rush the sweetness, kiddo. You earn it, day by day." So when the lawyer handed me the papers, I didn't hesitate. I sold my little car, emptied my savings, $38,000, and bought the farm outright. My father laughed out loud. "You're spending your savings on that? You might as well throw it in a ditch, Claire." That laugh, it burned into my memory. The first few months were brutal. The hives were weak, the equipment outdated, and I barely knew what I was doing. I watched videos late into the night, joined online forums, and called local beekeepers for advice. Every sting felt like a lesson, every failed batch of honey like a test of faith. The neighbors whispered that I'd lost my mind, the city girl trying to play farmer. Even Mom stopped checking in, except to ask if I was done wasting time yet. But I remembered Grandpa's voice every time I felt like giving up. "You don't grow honey, Claire. You grow trust between you and them." So I worked. I repaired old hives with my bare hands. I learned the rhythm of the bees, when they rested, when they raged, when they thrived. By fall, the flowers came back strong. The hum of the hives was deeper, steadier. I started to believe maybe, just maybe, the laughter had been wrong. Still, one thing was clear. This wasn't going to be easy. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove to myself that Grandpa's useless bee farm still had life, and that I did too. That winter, as frost gathered on the shed windows, I looked out over the silent hives and whispered, "Don't worry, Grandpa. I'll bring the sweetness back." The first real spring on the farm was chaos. The snow melted into mud, the hives needed rebuilding, and I was constantly running between repairs, feeding schedules, and pest control. My hands were swollen from stings, my arms full of scratches, and my bank account nearly empty. Every mistake cost money, more than I had. I'd underestimated everything: the maintenance, the feed, the sheer patience it took to keep bees alive through weather swings and parasites. Some mornings, I'd wake up with the sinking feeling that my father had been right, that I'd wasted my savings on a dream that was never meant to work. He didn't make it easier. When he called, it wasn't to check on me. It was to remind me of how real adults manage their money. "Claire," he said one night over the phone, his voice dripping with smug concern, "you're not too proud to admit when you're wrong, are you? You could still sell that place before it collapses completely." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Thanks, Dad. I've got it handled." He chuckled. "Sure you do, honey bee." Then he hung up. That night, I sat on the porch under the buzzing stars, tears drying on my face. The darkness felt heavier than usual. But then, a sound caught my ear. A low, steady hum from the hives. My girls were still working, still living, still moving forward. If they could, so could I. I threw myself into learning, real technical learning. I attended local agriculture meetings, studied pollination cycles, and discovered that Grandpa's land sat on a rare mix of wildflowers perfect for organic honey. I experimented with new hive designs, improved ventilation, and began tracking yield data like a scientist. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, the honey started flowing. Thick, golden, and pure. The first jar I filled by hand, I labeled simply, "For Grandpa." Still, the world didn't turn kind overnight. The bees got hit by mites one season, and I lost nearly a third of the hives. I cried for hours that night, not because of the money, but because it felt like failing someone I loved. But failure, I realized, wasn't final. It was fertilizer. By summer, I found new suppliers, new methods. I partnered with a local farmer to cross-pollinate his orchards. His trees flourished, and he offered me a spot at his stand to sell my honey. The first weekend I set up, I sold out by noon. People kept coming back for more, drawn by the label Ross Valley Honey, hand-harvested, homegrown, honest. Word spread. One customer turned into 10, then 50. A local restaurant placed an order, then a boutique grocer. My small shed became a full workspace, buzzing with jars and labels and pride. Meanwhile, my family still didn't ask how I was doing. At Christmas, my father joked in front of relatives that Claire's still playing with bees, and my sister laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. I didn't argue. I just smiled. Because I had something they didn't. Purpose. And somewhere deep in my gut, I knew the next time they laughed, it wouldn't be at me. It would be out of shock. The bees had taught me patience, and patience was about to pay off.
By the next spring, everything began to change. The frost lifted early that year, and with it, the first wildflowers bloomed, fields of clover, goldenrod, and blackberry blossoms stretching beyond the fences Grandpa built decades ago. The air was alive with the hum of thousands of tiny wings, a sound that felt like applause from the earth itself. I'd spent the winter improving everything. New hives, better feeders, careful record keeping, and branding that finally reflected what I'd built. Ross Valley Honey, nature's legacy in a jar. It wasn't just honey anymore, it was a story. And stories sell. I began marketing online, using a small social media account to share photos of the bees, the land, and Grandpa's handwritten notes. People connected with it, the idea of preserving something pure and old-fashioned in a busy world. Orders began trickling in from other states. A food blogger featured me, then a local magazine called. One afternoon, while labeling jars, my phone buzzed, an invitation to enter the State Agricultural Fair's Artisan Food Competition, the same one Grandpa used to attend every summer, always coming home with a smile and a participation ribbon. I didn't hesitate. I sent in my registration and began preparing the purest batch I'd ever made. Golden, fragrant, the kind of honey that glowed like sunlight in a jar. I named it Grandpa's Legacy. But the funny thing about success is that it doesn't stay secret for long. When I stopped by my parents' house one Sunday to drop off a few jars, Mom smiled politely, but Dad barely looked up from his paper. "You're still doing that bee thing?" he asked, not even glancing at the label. I kept my voice steady. "It's more than a bee thing, Dad. The farm is profitable now." He snorted. "Well, I'll believe it when I see it." Brooke, my sister, chimed in from across the room. "You should bring some of that honey to the fair next month. Dad loves seeing all those hobbyists trying to make it big." She laughed. I smiled quietly. "I'll be there." What I didn't say was that I'd already been shortlisted as a finalist. The week before the fair, I barely slept. Between packing jars, setting up displays, and tending to the hives, I was running on caffeine and adrenaline. But beneath the exhaustion, there was something deeper. Pride. Not the loud, boastful kind. The kind that hums under your ribs when you realize you've built something out of nothing. The fair day arrived bright and golden. Rows of booths shimmered with sunlight, jams, cheeses, crafts, and rows of honey in every shade imaginable. I set my display neatly, with Grandpa's photo standing beside the jars. As I was finishing, I spotted them, my parents and Brooke, walking down the row. Dad looked like he'd just stepped off a golf course, hands in pockets, curiosity on his face. "Couldn't resist seeing what all the buzz was about," he joked, grinning at his own pun. I laughed softly. "You'll see soon enough." When the judges stopped at my booth, they took one spoonful of Grandpa's Legacy and paused, their faces lighting up. One leaned in and whispered something to another. Then they smiled at me. That was the moment I knew. Something was coming. Something golden.
If you've made it this far and the story's got you hooked, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned, because what happens next isn't just payback, it's peace served cold.
The announcement came just before noon. A hush fell over the crowd as the fair organizer stepped up to the stage, a microphone squealing softly in the warm air. I stood behind my booth, heart thudding, hands sticky with traces of honey. They began listing the winners: jams, syrups, herbal spreads. Then finally, the category I'd entered, artisan honey. In third place, the announcer said, Oakwood apiaries. Polite applause. In second place, Miller and Sons Honey Co. Louder clapping. I drew a breath. My father, standing a few feet away, folded his arms like he'd already decided the outcome. Brooke checked her phone, barely paying attention. And the blue ribbon for Best in Show, Artisan Honey, goes to... The announcer smiled, scanning the crowd. Laura Ross, for Grandpa's legacy. For a second, I couldn't move. The crowd erupted in applause, and someone nudged me forward. I climbed onto the stage, blinking against the sunlight. They handed me the ribbon, that deep, brilliant blue. And for a moment, I swear I saw Grandpa in my mind, smiling in his old straw hat. When I looked down, my parents were staring up at me, frozen. Dad's mouth hung open just slightly. Mom clapped weakly, like she wasn't sure whether to be proud or embarrassed. Brooke checked her phone, barely paying attention. After the ceremony, I returned to my booth, still shaking a little. Within minutes, people swarmed the table. Journalists, vendors, and even the fair's general manager asking if I'd consider a supply partnership. By the time the sun began to set, I'd sold every jar. That's when my parents approached. Mom's voice was light, too casual. Honey, that was wonderful. You really made quite an impression today. Dad nodded, his tone shifting like gears in a truck. Looks like the old place might have been worth something after all. Maybe we can come by, help out a little, as a family project. There it was, the same tone he used when he thought there was money to be made. I smiled, resting my hands on the empty table. You laughed when I bought that farm. Remember? Dad chuckled uneasily. Oh, come on, we were just teasing. I reached into my bag and pulled out the ribbon. It shimmered in the fading light as I held it between us. This is Grandpa's name and mine. No one else's. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Brooke, trying to lighten the tension, picked up one of my remaining sample jars and turned to a couple walking by. Would you like to try my sister's award-winning honey? She said brightly. The irony nearly made me laugh. I took the jar gently from her hands. No, Brooke. Not yours. Not this time. The silence that followed was heavy, but not painful. Cleansing. Like the quiet after a storm. That evening, as I packed up the booth, I glanced toward the parking lot. My family was standing there, watching me from a distance, unsure how to approach. I gave a small wave, not of invitation, but closure. They'd come full circle. From laughter to pride to discomfort. And I'd come home. To myself. The morning after the fair, I woke to sunlight spilling across the kitchen table. A soft, golden glow that looked almost like honey. For a long time, I just sat there, listening to the hum outside the window. My bees were already awake, moving with purpose, never waiting for anyone's approval to begin their work. I'd always admired that about them, their quiet independence. The world could burn around them, storms could tear through the fields, and still they'd build, repair, and move forward. That morning, I decided to live like that. I spent the following weeks expanding the business. Orders flooded in from across the state, and a regional grocery chain reached out asking if I'd consider supplying them for their local heroes section. The word hero felt too big, too undeserved, but I said yes anyway. Grandpa's handwriting stayed on the label, the same crooked R that used to make me smile as a kid. I hired 2 part-time helpers, both young women trying to rebuild their lives after layoffs. They reminded me of myself, uncertain, underestimated, but full of grit. When I trained them, I told them the same thing Grandpa once told me. Bees don't wait for permission to make something sweet. Neither should you. By summer, the fields were full again. Taller grass, thicker blossoms, louder hums. The farm wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Then, one Sunday afternoon, as I was bottling a new batch, my phone buzzed. Mom. I almost didn't answer, but something in me said it was time. Hi, Mom, I said quietly. Oh, sweetheart, she started, her tone soft. We saw the article in the paper. You looked so beautiful up there, with that ribbon and all those jars. Your father was, well, he was speechless. I smiled faintly. That's a first. She hesitated, then sighed. He wants to come see the farm. Says he should have believed in you sooner. I leaned against the counter, watching a few bees drift lazily near the window. Maybe someday. But right now, I think the farm's doing fine without more hands in the hive. She laughed softly, and for once it wasn't strained. You sound like your grandfather. I hope so, I said. After we hung up, I stepped outside. The field stretched wide under the afternoon sun, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small standing on this land. Every post, every flower, every jar of honey, they were mine. Not because I'd inherited them, but because I'd fought for them. A car pulled up by the gate, my neighbor, Mrs. Delaney, holding a mason jar. Trade you, she said with a grin, your honey for my strawberry jam. I laughed and took it. Deal. That's the kind of community Grandpa always wanted here. People sharing, helping, sweetening each other's lives a little at a time. Later that evening, as the sky deepened to amber and pink, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea sweetened by my own honey. I could see the hives glowing softly in the distance, each one buzzing with life. My kids, if I ever have them, I thought, will grow up knowing this. Success isn't about applause or validation. It's about standing where you belong and knowing you built it yourself. As the crickets began to sing and the air cooled, I found myself whispering almost to Grandpa, "You were right. The land always gives back, but only if you listen." A gentle breeze carried the scent of clover and smoke from the distant hills. I closed my eyes and breathed it in. No bitterness, no need for revenge, just peace. Slow, steady, earned. The same kind the bees make, one golden drop at a time. I used to think success was about proving people wrong. Now I know it's about quietly building something so beautiful, even the ones who doubted you can't help but taste the sweetness.